Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy, and today we're talking about whether we're supposed to lower our standards.
Do you remember the old, maybe we can link to it on the show notes, I believe it was Mad TV that had a dating app?
It was lowered expectations. This is like,
Lowered expectation.
it's an old deluxe alert, and we've hit it many times. Lowered expectations. That was for dating, that you should lower your standards and then you'll have more
Yes.
success in dating. I mean, an apt comparison, because often the idea is, I've had it certainly presented to me, like, well, you like things done a certain way, so I can't put the dishes away because I don't know where they go. And I usually call BS on that. I don't care where the pots and pans go. I care that I'm not looking at them. Just shove them in the cabinet. But I get back the whole, like, well, if only you'd lower your expectations, I'd be able to help more. Can you tell I have feelings about this?
Wow, Amy's
it's
coming
not
in
a thing.
hot, friends. But I have to stop you, Amy, before we get into your rants, your screeds, and your score settlings, which I, by the way, am here for.
Mm-hmm.
We should read our mailbag.
The mailbag is sort of the topic. Like this is a mailbag and a topic, which we are always happy to entertain listener suggestions. We get them in our Facebook group. This one came over email, info@whatfreshhellpodcast.com. Dana, she said, "Hi, Amy and Margaret. I'm a big fan of the podcast. Every week, I feel like I get to have a conversation with two friends." Thanks, Dana. On your recent episode, Making the Invisible Work Visible, you talked a lot about Eve Rodsky and her book, Fair Play, which we did. We interviewed her, and we'll put the link to that interview in the show notes. Dana says there's a big section of that book that doesn't get talked about enough, which is agreed upon acceptable minimums. No two people are going to do a task exactly the same way, but parenting partners need to agree as to what the acceptable minimums are when a task is done. This is Dana's example. What does enrolling in summer camp mean? Is it just filling out the sign up online, or is it the sign up plus the doctor's forms plus the bus form plus the payment schedule? Resentment comes, says Dana, from the absence of conversation about what is the minimum expectation when a co-parent takes something on that they might not have done in the past.
Yeah.
Keep the episodes of coming. Sincerely, Dana.
That's absolutely right. And I think that there is an expectation around this as well that comes up for me in other parts of my life, which is happy to help. I'll do whatever you need. Like, I'm looking to you, coach, to tell me like what to do next. And I'm like, I don't even want to be the coach.
No.
I want
that's right.
you to be the coach.
Right.
I want you to quarterback this thing. I want you to see around the corners, find the potential problems. And this is the ongoing conflict of my marriage, which is that my husband, who is like 100% on board to do more than 50% of the workload for sure, and like wants to be helpful and wants to get in there, but it's the question of, I want you to run this. I don't want you to do tasks that I assign you.
Right. But when you say that, I mean, I agree, like, just do it. But then you hit, when you don't have agreed upon acceptable minimums, you reach, I meant to pull this. I wrote about this in my book in 2010. When did I get like this? I told the story of my spouse said, I'll give the baby a bath. And I wasn't specific that giving the baby a bath means filling the bathtub, putting the baby in it, washing the baby, taking the baby out of the bathtub, drying her, draining the bathtub, putting the washcloth up to dry, wiping up the floor, of the water that you got everywhere, putting a diaper on the baby and pajamas on the baby, drying the baby. And then when I didn't do that, I had a naked baby running around in my house and like a horrible mess in the bathroom. I'm like, well, I bathed the baby. I'm like, but bathing the baby includes those 36 steps,
Yeah.
but not in my parenting partner's mind. And so I think you're right. There is this, like, you should see around court. You should know that bathing the baby includes cleaning up after you bathe the baby, but maybe you need to have an explicit conversation sometimes.
Yes, but sometimes having the conversation is super frustrating. And like, by the time I have this conversation and walk you through all the steps, like, I want you to figure it out. And
Right.
certainly there is a world in which you can figure it out. I mean, things that happen in the house, I do think that there are some standards that like I want it done this way and my husband has a funny thing where I don't know where this comes from, but I'm like, "Hey, could you put the salad together?" And he's always like, "I read somewhere that pepper is good on salad." And he'll just like put a bunch of pepper in the salad. And then I'm like, "This salad tastes terrible. It tastes like pepper." Like, could you just do it, but don't make it better? Just do it my way. Like, I don't actually want the like burgers that you saw somewhere online that like soy sauce and garlic if you put that on a burger beforehand. Like, I don't want it improved. I just want it done my way. And so part of that is the problem that I'm like, there is only one way to make a salad or burgers. I don't want your improvement.
Right. And you have to do it my way. But if it is important to you, I mean, so let's just take the Eve Rodsky point of view, which some people have had success with, and some people, whatever. It's one point of view. But hers is, yeah, if you don't want to have a fight later about why do you always ruin the salad by putting weird stuff in it, then you have to have an explicit that the explicit conversation prevents your, gnashing your teeth in frustration when you're cleaning the bathroom at 11:15 at night because the tub is still full of, cloudy water and there's towels everywhere. You need to be more explicit. Do you want more buy-in from the parenting partner who traditionally does less or not? Yes. Do you not want them to feel micromanaged? Yes. She argues that the way to do that is not to be like afterwards to be like, but you didn't do it the way I think you should do it, but to have an agreed upon thing. Like when we're making family dinner, we don't put pepper in the salad because then the kids won't eat it. So can we have that stuff on the side? That you do that ahead of time to avoid resentments. I mean, I'm not saying that this would totally work. I'm saying I'm here for this notion that you have to back up that conversation.
I see situations where it makes a lot of sense, and I see situations where it's extremely annoying. And I do have my phrase that I like, which is tag your it, which means you go do this thing. Summer camp registration, here's where they're going. Tag your it. That means here's the name of the camp. That's all I'm giving you. You go on, you find the forms. You figure out what needs to be filled out. Like, this is a tag your it. And I do find that phrase is generally helpful. And I guess there's not a ton of variables in the outcome there. Like,
Yeah,
either
but
you're going to.
there is if you don't know that tag your it means you have to do the medical forms and the bus forms too.
I guess that's right. But like, then if it comes back, they email you back, you need the medical forms. I forward it. You need to do this next. Like,
Right. Then you
it
have to do that
really
without
is your
resentment.
problem. I think the
Right.
problem is sometimes to me, clean up the playroom means if there's winter coats in there and it's spring, bring them to where we store them. But a lot of people just think it means, a lot of people in my house who shall remain nameless, think that it means just put stuff kind of on hooks and like towards the sides of the room and then vacuum the rug. And they're very different. The variables are larger
Right.
there.
And so you have to come to this agreement of the minimum standard of care,
Yes.
what that is and what that looks like. The problem comes when you disagree. So let's use an example about the minimum standard of care. I don't have a yard. I live in New York City. But if I did, I am sure that I would let my male spouse be in charge of lawn mowing, right? Like it's grass, so it somehow belongs to the man. I mean, right or wrong, that would probably be how we divide the labor. You have to keep the lawn looking nice. But what does that mean? I might be married to somebody in this entirely hypothetical lawn-free example that I have. My spouse might be like, it looks fine. And I'm like, it doesn't look fine. Our grass is 3 inches longer than the neighbors, and you can see the line in the yard. Who cares? Well, I care. And that's when you have to get into this community standard, which is what she says, like, when you're disagreeing over does this matter that there's dandelions everywhere in our front yard, then you have to go to sort of the community standard of like, what is the reasonable expectation that one might have about lawn care? And how seriously are we going to take it? If it's a 10 out of 10 to me that there never be a dandelion in our yard, and it's a 2 out of 10 for you, can we make it like a 5 out of 10 that every 2 weeks the lawn gets mowed? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. And these things do have very, very different levels of
Right.
importance to um, different members of the household. And also, I think the conversation around it can also include that I know in my house, my husband works out of the house weekdays, is home on the weekends. And I do tend to have like, okay, phew, now here's 68 things I want to get done. And some of the conflict was just not having a conversation around it's important to me to have 4 hours of kind of downtime. Listen, when you have little kids, you can take your downtime. It's not happening. But I mean, now that the kids are a little bit older, like, what are your priorities for the weekend and what are my priorities for the weekend? And which of those priorities can coexist? And
Yes.
my husband is big on I'm going to get these 68 tasks done and I'm going to build a tree house and I'm going to take the kids to all their activities. And I'm like, those things cannot coexist. There is, unless you find a wormhole in time, like you can't do 68 things this weekend. And so it ends up with a lot of frustration of, I thought you were going to do this and making the plan around what is feasible and possible and also what you want to do because the lawn may be a priority when it starts getting noticeably longer, but maybe painting the shed is not a priority if it's been a tough week, you know,
Right.
and figuring out where you come out on it goes a lot to Lynetta Willis's like get on the same side of the net as the problems areas, which
Right.
is
But like painting the shed has to happen eventually, mowing the lawn has to happen eventually, and it is completely reasonable. Like I can see being in that situation being like painting the shed is the last thing that has to happen. We have to look at the calendar and decide how we're going to travel to your cousin's wedding next month, right? Whereas for my spouse could be painting the shed, I'm going to be making memories with my teenager out
right.
there, you know. We're going to have a nice afternoon and then I thought I'd take them for pizza afterwards and I'm like that's like the least important thing that has to happen this weekend. Our taxes are due in 2 days, whatever. Um the priorities, the reasons for wanting to paint the shed could be fun and relaxation, could be gathering, and it doesn't make one good and one bad. It just makes them you're at cross purposes.
Yeah. I do think that coming at this from that maximum place of generosity that we talk about is it allows for um you know, I don't care about golf. I would rather talk about anything, watch and I mean it's so boring to me like I would rather watch paint dry.
Mm-hmm.
But, you
Yes.
know, it's big golf tournament weekend that I don't care about. It's falling on the weekend of busy things. It's springtime. It's a lot of stuff going on. But if we can have a conversation around like, can we organize the day so that you can do your golf watching or playing or whatever nonsensical thing you want to do that is not important to me, then we have a better chance of having a successful marital weekend because we're actually having a conversation about it. And I'm not just like shooting daggers at you and planning to poison your Gatorade while you watch golf and I look at the 86 million things that need to be done.
Right. Right. So there's a way that the minimum standard of care can completely boomerang back on you, and I think there's a way to be ready for it. And I think Eve Rodsky provides a way to be ready for it. So I'm going to tell you what that is right after this.
Can't wait.
So there's an example of the minimum standard of care that I think sort of encapsulates how this could start to be like, well, if you weren't so uptight about everything, right? Let's use this other and completely hypothetical example. You are out for the morning and your spouse is going to take your kid to a birthday party.
Yeah.
The gift is on the table. You might have even done that much, but the gift's on the table, take them to the party. Took the kid to the party, didn't wrap the gift. Or find out they're about to leave, they're 5 minutes and they haven't wrapped the gift. You haven't wrapped the gift for the party. Who cares? Why are you so uptight about everything? Gifts don't need to be wrapped for parties. Like that's like why are you so uptight about everything all the time? It's not a big deal. Going by the community standard, you could argue like, yeah, it is a big deal. You show up at parties with wrapped gifts. The birthday kid wants to unwrap a gift. Our kid is going to be embarrassed walking in with a gift. Leave 10 minutes earlier and stop at CVS for a gift bag. There is a community standard around you do bring a wrapped gift to a child's birthday party, and I'm not being a jerk for holding you, quote unquote, to that standard.
And I think this gets much more subtle in terms of who does the blowback hit when this doesn't happen correctly. And this is an example. And I do think that we can fight back against this and resist it to some degree. But when you forget to send your mother a birthday card, it becomes we forgot, right? Like when I forget to send my father a birthday card, there is no blowback on my husband to that
Right.
at all. And so, and I do think that that's something that I had to kind of explain to my husband, that when you show up a mess, maybe it's haha, your wife must be out of town, but writ large, the blowback is on me for things that, if people came to our house at the holidays and there were no decorations and the house was a huge mess and we were just handing people gifts from the closet, that's someone's looking at that and thinking, I have failed. They're
Right.
not. They're like, well, he must be busy at work and she is a
right.
terrible hostess.
Right.
And I do think you can give a lot of voice to that. I do think that we have made efforts to rectify this. And I know many of my friends, and I see it. It's like, okay, this is not only going to be the female's job in the house to keep in touch with family and do all of this stuff. And it does bother me, though. It does bother me. And this is, I think people would give me the advice of, if your husband falls down on his relationship with his family, that's not your problem. But I fret about it at night. Like, I can't let go
You're
of
not
it.
wrong. You're right. You're not wrong that somebody else will think that you fell down. I mean,
And-
you
and
could be okay
even
with
just-
that, but that doesn't make it not true.
And it's not even just what people think of me. It bothers me on like a fundamental level that, like, this has never happened. I'm using a completely random example. But like, if I know my husband's mom's birthday is coming up, right? It's in February. It's January, end of January. I know he hasn't gotten anything. I know he's forgotten. I know he's not going to do anything about it. The pain of that is psychologically painful to me, whether or not I have decided to stay out of it. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Staying out of it's hard too. Right.
Staying
right.
out of it's really hard. And looking at someone and saying, I'm going to watch you disappoint your mom on her birthday. Again, a completely random example that has never happened. But you know what I mean? Like, it's not as easy as to just say, like, well, let it go. That's their relationship. That's their problem. It upsets me.
Well, let's use that as an example towards what might be a different way to look at that. It's very important to you in this example that you have a good relationship with your extended family on both sides, right?
Yes.
That everybody in your extended families feels at home with both of you, doesn't have lingering resentments, whatever. You don't want that kind of thing. That's really important to you.
Right.
And in that example, it might be like, it's so important to me that I have a good relationship with my in-laws that I am going to oversee the gifts, which would really more traditionally be your job. It's your mother, but I'll oversee that. And then maybe you take something else. Like, it's division of labor thing.
Yeah.
And it's important to you. Or you start with the goal. So this is how you decide, like, how important stuff is. Dirty dishes in the sink. Like, why do you care if there's dirty dishes in the sink till tomorrow? And you think, screaming inside your head, because then they'll be there for me tomorrow when nobody's home except me, right? If you come at it from the point of view of like goals. So say like your goal is a family getting on the same side of the net. If your goal together is to really have downtime after the kids go to bed, to be done cleaning up after the kids go to bed so that you can sit on the couch and relax and, watch Shogun or whatever, then that goal drives the division of labor that happens at 7:00, and you don't leave everything to soak. You finish the job and start the dishwasher so that we can be together alone when the kids go to bed, and I don't have to go back into the kitchen for another 20 minutes to finish closing up, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's driven by the goal. The example in my family is that, how group texts happen with family stuff, and I do it myself.
My
If I have to
favorite
let
meme
everybody know-
ever. I've never been in a hostage situation, but I have been in a group text.
I mean, so let's say like I have a new nephew who's going to get baptized one of these days soon, and I'll probably be alerted to that in a family group text. I have a large family, and my brother and sister-in-law, I imagine, when they let us know when it is, will sort of text one person. This is how I do it. I text my brother or my sister-in-law, my sister or my brother-in-law, like sort of one person from each household.
Okay.
I got it. I'm assuming when I send this, I'll make it my kid's baptism, which obviously it's not. That would be a very blessed event. But
Would it though, Amy?
I'm sending it. I'm not going to group text all these people. I'm texting one person from this household, one person from that whole household, assuming that that information will be disseminated to the other members of that household. Oh,
Right.
the baptism is June 15th. I lived with somebody who doesn't understand that if important information is delivered via a family group text to which I was not a party because the family representative was my spouse instead of me, it is incumbent upon that person to share that information with the person who wasn't in on the group text, lest they seem like a bad person when they get to the baptism and they didn't know there was a baptism.
Right.
And
Right. Which is, it's like, I feel like Amy and I now run a company together. I say this at work all the time. Like, is it a systems problem or is it human error? Because human error happens. And like, oops, I typed an 8 instead of a 9. Like, that can't really be fixed. But it's system error and like calendaring and all of these things that you put in place, because if you depend on somebody remembering the group text, and then it becomes the other problem of they're only going to communicate with you because they know that the information is not going to get to you through
Right.
your spouse.
Right.
And then it kind of drags you back into the whole thing of like, I am doing everything and I'm doing a lot of jobs that I didn't sign up for.
I have a systems quote for you since you went to systems.
I love a system.
Greg McKeown, who wrote a book called Essentialism, very good book about sort of like doing what matters and paring away what doesn't, which is another part of this work, I think. He says, there are 3 people in every busy relationship. Person A, person B, and the third person, quote unquote, is the system that governs them. When things feel overwhelming, most people point at their partner to explain it, but more often than not, the system itself is the problem.
I'm a genius because I just said this.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, I think that approaching marriage more and more like a business partnership has been extremely helpful for me and my spouse in terms of like, Sunday calendaring. Like, what do you got? Who's doing what pickups? Because I don't want to be the default parent. I do tend, because of the way I work, to have a more flexible schedule. So defaults, pickups fall to me and drop offs and this kind of stuff, which is okay. It's totally fine. I don't mind doing that part of it. But I think when stuff starts flowing completely by default at all times is when you get into some real issues. And I teach at night. My nighttime schedule can be complicated. It's like, we just do the schedule because I don't want to run across the thing of, oh, I now have to cancel something that's important to me because I'm the default picker-upper.
Right.
And
Right. Or at least not every time, right?
definitely not
Wiffle
every
ball
time.
rules. Right. This time it's you that has to cancel the
I
meeting.
talked about it on a recent episode, but I've been reading Liz Lenz's new book, which is called The American Ex-Wife. And it is a very interesting story about her marriage, her divorce, and her kind of strong point of view about the limitations of marriage for women. And it's a challenging book because you have this instinct the whole time you're reading it to be like, I like my marriage. I'm fine. But if you let that go and are actually able to like listen to some of the information, it's super interesting. And I do think some of these defaults are really interesting to me. And I see it all the time. And people say it all the time, right? That like the school calls, what do they call you? They call you by your husband's name. They assume that you're the person responsible for anything that's going on. One of the moms in the community gets sick and she's arranging all of the coverage for her and her kids. It's not her husband who's doing it. It's the female default community is just something I think that's very worth at least giving view to. And I have been, you could probably hear, a little sick in the last couple of weeks. And this weekend I was feeling better and I was starting to clean up. And I basically realized, like, I'd been sick for 2 weeks and everything had frozen in the house in terms of, like, no coats had been picked up, no splashes. And, my husband's picking up a lot of slack cooking and doing some stuff that he
Sure,
doesn't
right.
always do.
Right. If you went to zero,
I was
he's
pretty much
doing
at
a lot.
zero. But I said to my whole family, hey, this is 2 weeks of work that just didn't get done. Like, this is actually not okay. I'm not the maid. Like, I'm not on vacation. Like, you have to pick up this slack if I need help. And I think that it's not always the easiest conversation, but it is worth kind of giving visibility to. And my husband said, oh, I never mean that like I'm saving it for you. And I'm like, I get it, but I don't know if it's as important what you meant. Because of course what you meant was like, I don't feel like doing the dishes, I don't feel like cleaning up. I get it. It might be more important though what it means to me, what it signals to me, which is like, oh, the maid will be back soon, we'll just leave it for her. Like, if that's the message I'm getting, I'm not sure how interested I am in what everybody was trying to do.
Sheila Ray Gregoire has a blog called Bare Marriage, Bare Marriage, and she has a podcast too. It's interesting. And she addressed this on her Bare Marriage website when you're sort of stuck deciding standards. So I thought we could talk through a couple of these solutions that she has when you disagree about the minimum standard of care, right? Like, who cares what the lawn looks like, right? Who cares if the kids are in dirty clothes and they go to school? Who cares?
I do. I care.
Or here's one for you. Who cares about rinsing dishes before they go in the dishwasher? Like, who cares? It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Don't ever come to my house and not rinse a dish.
Yeah. So she suggests, it's an obvious suggestion, but a really good one, that the chore that you might be in conflict about, Google it and see, and you'll find chores lists. Like, say, like, change the sheets chores list. If you're fighting with your spouse that sheets need to be changed once every week versus once every season, you can Google chores lists, and on that list will be, some standard of every 2 weeks you have to change the sheets, whatever it says. And then you have a sort of a third party, you can even ask AI, a third party sort of opinion on how often does the world think something like this should be done? How well does the world think dishes should be rinsed before they go in the dishwasher? And use that as a sort of way to establish a standard of care around something that you and your spouse might disagree with.
I like it. I have more thoughts, and we'll be right back after this. Where I fall down on all of this stuff is why always more work for me, And I think it is, I get it. I get the big picture. It feels a little bit like, just take my word for it too. Like, I do know better how often the sheets need to be changed. Like, do I really have to Google it for you and show you?
You do if your spouse is giving you a hard time and refuses to do their share, because it's like, it's fine, it doesn't matter.
I feel like by the time I'm Googling how many times do we have to change our sheets, to prove to you that I'm right about that, I'm very closely looking at the Dateline solution.
Very angry. But yes, the goal is to not fight anymore. Like, the goal is to come to an agreement on this is how it goes, and then I'm not going to say you didn't do it right every time anymore, because we've agreed on what quote unquote right is, and that's it. And we're not talking about it anymore after this.
I guess that's true. And I do think that it's best intentions. So I think that to the degree that I would say by the time you're Googling and showing people this, we might be a little off on best intentions. You know what I mean? It just feels to me like, yeah, gotta Google this.
I don't know.
You?
I disagree. I mean, you get a lot of pushback. This is for everybody out there who's being told when they're asking for more help that they are too perfectionist, that their standards are too high, that they think that stuff needs to be done that doesn't have to be done. Now, if you're telling your kids to dust the baseboards every day, maybe you should Google how often do you dust the baseboards and see that it could happen, once every 2 months. And okay, then maybe you do need to dial back. There might be somebody who needs to receive that messaging. But this is for the people that who are asking for somebody else to step up and are being told the problem is that you care about things that I don't.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Because it could theoretically go both ways.
Sure. And then on the other hand, here's the next rule. This is also from Sheila Ray Gregoire. These are her ideas about how you decide standards between you in a sort of third-party way. If someone insists on higher than minimum community standards, they need to own the task. This is a good one for me. Like, I like to fold the towels a certain way. I fold them in thirds, then I fold them in thirds. I don't want them folded like in half and then in half.
Thirds
I like
and thirds
them to
is
be
the only correct way to fold
right.
a
It's the only
towel.
way. Okay, right. So fine. So I'll fold the towels. Like, because that's not
This is a
really
slippery slope, though, right? Because it's like weaponized incompetence comes slipping right in here, right? Which is like,
Yes.
I don't know how to do it. I guess I don't know. I don't know how you want it done.
right.
So,
But if you really care, then right. Well, let's use a slightly harder example. If you want your fitted sheets to be folded so perfectly that you can't tell that they're a fitted sheet when you're looking at them on the shelf because they're
please
perfectly
come over
folded.
to my house if you know how to do that.
Please start a business doing that for everybody in your neighborhood. But like,
How
if
come
it's
they haven't
folded,
come up
it's
with a
folded.
gadget for that? Yeah. I agree, but I think that this is a slippery slope that you have to be very careful of, which is like, I don't want a half a plate of mac and cheese going into my dishwasher and then everything tastes disgusting coming out of the dishwasher for the next 3 months. And that doesn't mean I have to do the dishes. There's a
Right.
very wide, especially like I have a house full of teenagers right now. And I'm like, no. This is not, I do think that there are realms here where I'm like, I am the queen of this. And I am, when I teach, sometimes I call it benevolent dictator. Like, I am going to tell you how to do this. And I am not interested in your perspective on how to do this. Like, I am teaching you. I am the benevolent dictator in this situation. And not everything's a debate. So I'm not going to have 10 back and forths about how we're doing this. I am in charge of this room. And I feel that way about some of the household tasks. Like, I'm not going to have a debate about whether or not my standards are too high. You're going to fold the towels this way. And that's when I know it's done, when I see them that way in the closet.
You only have to do this work, I would argue, if you're getting pushback.
Yeah.
Like if your spouse is like, oh, yeah, I like when the towels look like that too. I'm not saying you have to go through each thing and decide what this is ways around long-standing disagreements and frustration that you're doing more than your share and somebody else is slacking off. These are some ways to address this that
For
don't
sure.
turn into why are you yelling all the time.
And there may be areas where it's like, if you want the dishes, lined up in a certain way or they organized in display, that may be a bridge too far. But I do think it's also fair. Maybe check yourself on these things. But if you're at minimum standard of care, to be like, this is how I need it to be done. So don't put stuff in my dishwasher that's got food on it. It's not that's not how we do it here.
Don't, here's the next one. Don't be upset at your spouse for performing at the same level that you would. So this is an example that Sheila Ray Gregoire gives that it's been a day. There's been a thing and a thing. It's been a rough day, and it's chicken fingers and French fries for dinner because it's just been a rough day. And your non-cooking dinner spouse responds with like, really? It's chicken fingers and French fries for dinner? And when you have a kid who's very sick, you don't give the spouse for doing the same thing you would have done in that situation. Say like that, then that spouse the next day, they're in charge of dinner and they order pizza. Like, okay, because like when it was your turn, you too were overwhelmed by our current situation and you ordered pizza, but it's not okay for me to make chicken fingers and French fries for grown-ups for dinner because things are hard right now.
I think one of the things that is emerging in this conversation for me too is kind of realms that like you have to do the macro and the micro. And like the macro is kind of, we do have our realms that we lord over, and that you can't really have a debate about every single thing, that like, to be very gendered and sexist, like if your husband brings the car in for repair, you're not like, you paid $38 for an oil, like it's like we don't just pounce all over the other person's realm and tell them how to do everything. And I think that like there are And that when someone is in your realm, they may not be doing it at the same level that you are able to do it, you
Right.
know? In the same way that I would not go to my husband's job and tell him how to do stuff, or, he does a lot of outdoors stuff with our kids and camping and stuff. And I don't come and be like, what were you eating on the camp out? What was it like? Like, did you make them brush their teeth? Like, it's like when you're camping, it's your realm, I guess.
Well, like I'm thinking like being out in the yard, if you were raking leaves in the yard and then you left the rakes in the yard for 2 or 3 days, as long as I'm not the one cleaning up the rakes, I guess I don't really care about that. But if you leave stuff for me to clean up, like dishes in the sink,
Yeah.
and then, then you correct my standards of having cleaned up the dishes that you left behind, then there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there's a way to verbalize. I do it all the time with my kids where I'm like, can you pick up your coat? That's the second time I've asked you. Can you pick up your coat? That's the fourth ask, just to give visibility to like the reason you're hearing this frustration in my voice is because I'm now on my fourth time asking you. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just being an unreasonable harpy who yells, pick up your coat. I'm like, pick up your coat, please. Fourth ask. Like that annoyance, you should know where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I find with my husband sometimes, especially on the weekends, which is generally when we're doing stuff, I'm like, I'm going to write down 4 things that have to happen by the end of the day, and I'm going to do some of that organization because it's the things that are important. I mean, we have
Right.
a thing that you hit golf balls into that I said before it started to snow, I wanted that to be gone. And my husband was very proudly announcing yesterday that he was so smart. He never put it away, and now the snow melted. And so now it's back again. And I was like, I'm going to throw you into the yard. But
you don't have to step over that every time you come in your front
I
door.
mean,
Like
it is
it's
an
out there
eyesore.
somewhere.
I guess you have to pick your battles. Like I was like, ha ha ha, grr.
Meanwhile, you're Googling, what is the minimum standard of care?
Yeah,
Right?
it's
Chart.
definitely a lot lower than not leaving that thing out
Right.
all
All
winter to get
winter.
snowed on and ruined. And but I do think that it's a balance of taking ownership of the stuff. Basically, it's getting on the same side of the net. It's like, here's the problem. We have 6 things we have to do today. What are your priorities? What are my priorities? What are your times look like? And like just trying to attack the problems together. But then also I think you can give voice to your spouse of like, I want you on my team too. So my team doesn't come back at like, this is dumb. I don't care about this. Like you got to be on my team too. That's I do hauled up on that thing of like, and now I got to convince you to do it.
Right.
No, thank you.
Well, you will like the last rule that Sheila Ray
Live by yourself on an
Gregoire
island.
came up with.
Men are scum.
This is her last rule of deciding standards. Just because someone says their spouse's standards are too high does not mean that they are.
Yeah. And I think that you can say like, listen, we have kind of decided that this is my realm, and in my realm, I am queen, and the queen decides when the dishes are clean and when the sheets get, changed over, and where the kids go to summer camp and how much that costs. Like,
in your house.
don't come at me in my realm. Yeah, in my house. That's right. And so if you're in my realm, give me the benefit of the doubt. And if I'm in a realm of yours, I will give you the benefit of the doubt.
There's another pushback that we get that I wanted to mention briefly is that, well, we're doing too much, right? When it's like, I'm overwhelmed, I need help. Like, well, we need to dial it way back. Like the kids are in too many activities, right? We need to stop having people over for dinner. That the fix is to start doing less. And maybe it is. And maybe it's that everybody is pretty happy with the way things are, and what needs to be distributed is the workload, not how much is happening.
Well, I think that being on the same side of the net is part of that solution, too. That if your spouse, after helping with a lot of things, in a genuine way says, I find the very specific loading of the dishwasher that I always get corrected for frustrating, you're going to be willing to have a conversation about that, but it's that we get backed into corners where we're speaking in these big generalities of like, you always want things done your way and you are a lazy bum, that like, you got to take 10 steps in from that place, because maybe your spouse says, are the baseboards so important that I need to miss my, drinks with my friend that we've been planning for a month, or my poker game?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not, but you're at least on the same side of the problem. And I think that spouses are more open then to saying, okay, it's very reasonable for me to help with these 3 things that are on the list. And then perhaps we're more reasonable to say, okay, I can let these 3 things go, I guess, for this week, because maybe they're not that important.
Mm-hmm. Everything's not the same important.
It's not the same important. It's not. Amy, we solved it.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Have those conversations about minimum standards. Don't let it stop with, well, your standards are too high. They might
No,
not
and
be.
don't lower your standards for anyone, I would say. But,
Right.
recruit your team to help you maintain. You make it nice. Everybody
Mhm.
wants it nice.
Sure.
But it can't just be like you're so stuck up and dumb for wanting it nice that you don't deserve any help. That is absolutely unacceptable and rejected at
said.
all costs.
Well said.
Friends, we want you to raise your standards
So this is a great segue, I can tell already.
of rating the podcast. We need you to subscribe to the
They
podcast.
have very high standards. And
Yes, you have high standards, so tell people about them. You have high standards in podcasts. Really, Apple has just messed us all around with their updates, and they're hosing us, and we need
Not just
your
us,
help.
the podcasting industry.
Yeah, all
writ large.
podcasts, but we're taking it personally.
Long story.
Please go and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. It really helps us keep going, and we love doing the show, and we want to keep it going. So please do that for us today.
We really appreciate it. Some of you have done it already. We can tell. So thank you so much.
But if you haven't, we have your names, and we'll
Yeah,
be
yeah.
coming to your house to knock on your door to tell you to do it soon.
Minimum standard of care for a podcast that you like is to throw it some stars.
Minimum. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
So long.